My name is Ann Garner, as I mentioned to you all before. And so I am the industry advisor for technology. Basically, a quick pitch on what that means is Mason operates with an industry advising model, which is really we don't work with you based on your major. We work with you based on the industry in which you want to work. And it also allows us to connect to employers in those industries too, so that as we are working with them to help understand their recruiting needs, we can actually share some of that information to you. So as you're preparing a resume, as you're preparing to interview, you have the most up-to-date information on what those employers are looking for. All right, so we're going to move on. And as Mary Claire said, this is kind of a quick workshop. So we're going to hit the basics and I'm going to try to respond to your questions as we go. So certainly type them into the chat or Q&A and Mary Claire will let me know as we have questions. So I always like to start with the career readiness equation. The career readiness equation is one that we have found really works here at Mason as we think about how can we help our students and our graduates become career ready. And so it used to be some years ago that it was just enough to earn your college degree and you could get an entry-level role. And what we've seen over time is that it's very, very important to gain experience. In fact, if I was to say, like how many experiences, a minimum of 2 is what we find that employers are looking for. And these are experiences that will help you develop more fully your understanding of the field that you want to go into. It helps you learn industry knowledge. And in essence, it really helps to round out your degree. So depending on where you are in your college degree here at Mason, be thinking about getting an internship, volunteering, some sort, or perhaps a research experience, some sort of thing to help round out that degree. And then you have to know how to talk about it, right? You have to know how to present yourself in a resume, how to meet and interact with employers, and how to interview. And so that's the market yourself piece. So if you're able to do all of those things, we have seen students be more career ready and be more ready to enter the job market at that point. So as we talk about resumes, we really are talking about marketing yourself. That is the key component that resumes fit into. And then we'll talk a little bit about some of the other facets that they have sort of all kind of come together when you are preparing to do a job or internship search. So normally when I present this particular presentation to a classroom, I would see you all sitting out there and I would ask, what is one and only rule of resume writing? And what I'm going to do is just kind of go through these quickly instead of engaging you on the answers to these questions. But just think about that. What is the number one rule? And really the number of one rule is honesty. You want to be honest on your resume about your experiences, about your education. You don't want to say that you have done something or completed something when you haven't. And if you ever have any questions about that, please feel free to reach out to one of us if you feel like you have one of those gray areas, one of those situations where you're not sure. We're happy to help you with that. The next question is, what's the purpose of the resume? Oftentimes I have students who are sort of curious about that. Like, why can't I just fill out an application? And really, if you think about it, the purpose of the resume is not just to get a job. It actually is to get the interview, right? So I believe earlier today, one of my colleagues presented on virtual interviewing. That's a very critical piece of marketing yourself. But the resume is the first step. If you sort of get through that particular door, the interview process is next. So that really is the main purpose of that resume. And then what's the average length of time an employer spends reviewing a resume? I mean, after all, you're spending a lot of time, right? Putting this document together. So how much time did they spend? And on average, it's anywhere between 10 and 15 seconds, which sounds like a very short period of time, but given the number of resumes that recruiters are having to look at every single day, they know exactly what they're looking for. They know exactly the skills, the experience, the education. And so they pretty much zone in on those pretty quickly. And so that's why they go through them fairly quickly. Another piece I think that's important to, before we get into the nuts and bolts of resume writing, is to talk about the journey of the resume. I mean, from your perspective, you've created this document, you go online, you find a job that you want to apply to, you put it online. But do you know that before a human being looks at it, oftentimes you have one of these little bots. We've put a picture, obviously it's not exactly what it looks like, but there is a program or software within the applicant tracking system that most companies have, and they will look for keywords. And we're going to talk about keywords here very shortly. So it is really important that the words that you use in your resume really connect to and map to the types of requirements that the employer is looking for. So moving on, this is our title, our slide here is talking about being robot friendly. So what do we mean by that? It's really about using the keywords from the job description. So I believe I heard this from the previous panel for any of you who were actually listening to the recruiting panel that was on previously. They talked about, using keywords from the job description. It's really important to do that to be able to demonstrate that you are a good fit for the position. So oftentimes you may not send the same resume in for every job that you apply to. Which might seem hard to believe, but it is really important that your resume does map to the job description and what they're looking for. You want to obviously put your contact information at the top. That's really important for them to know how to reach you. There are standard fonts that you should use, and we've given you some examples here. You want to be really careful not to make your resume too complicated and too creative, if you will, because oftentimes those computer software applicant tracking systems that are scanning your resume are looking for those keywords, and to put a lot of extra items in the resume or creativity, if you will, sometimes it makes it not as easy for the resume to go through that software. So that's where the not using fancy formats come in. And then of course, abbreviations, being in the DC area, being part of, the government industrial area, there is the tendency to use acronyms and abbreviations. But in order for the recruiters to understand what you are meaning, it is very important to spell things out so that they understand. I'm going to pause here for a second and wondering, Mary Claire, if anything has come in at this point.
And we do have a couple of things, and I know we've just started, so if it's better to wait for these questions, let me know.
Okay.
One question that's come through is how to beef up your resume if you don't have any job experience, but you have volunteered and you've certainly done your coursework. Is that later on in the presentation?
Yeah, we'll talk definitely about that. There are definitely some ideas that I have, so we will certainly address that for sure, and that's a great question.
We also have a question from a student who wants to know if you're using too many buzzwords. Can you give a way to determine that? What's a good balance between your own verbiage and making sure you get that computer to register your resume?
Right, absolutely. So that's a great question. And I don't have a magic number for you per se. What I would say is really be sort of focused and honest about what your experience is. So I'll just give you a quick example. I support the technology area. So a lot of the students with whom I work, they are computer programmers, they know different programming languages, and perhaps let's say they worked on a project in a class where they used, let's say, Python, which is a programming language. For them to have Python in their technical skills section is important. But if they also used it in a project, it's really important to include it in that project description to make sure that the employer understands how you've applied that particular programming language. So that would be okay to, sort of mention it twice, or if you've used it again, that's fine as well. I just wouldn't put it in there if it's not pertinent to the description that you are putting into, let's say, your experience or in your project section. So what I'm going to go ahead and do, Mary Claire, is I'm going to go ahead and move on, but I'll stop periodically and we can see who else has questions.
Sounds great, Anne. We're getting a lot in, so I think it would be good for you to keep the content coming, and then we can see what we haven't covered.
Perfect, perfect. So right now what I'm going to do is what we call a resume review activity. So at this moment, I'm going to stop sharing my screen here in a second to show you something. But what I'd like to do is have you, if you have your resume on your computer or you have it close by, if you could pull it out, because we're going to review some sections. Now, if you don't have a resume yet, or you don't have your resume close by, don't worry about it, because what I'm going to do is I am going to show you a sample resume and point out some things about that resume. The information that you see up here on the screen right now is a copy of our newest career readiness guide. And for those who have worked with us before, you know that we have this guide. This is a great new guide. It's not currently on our website because it is still being worked through, but we anticipate that this particular version will be on our website soon. Mary Claire will put the link in the chat to the current one that we use, and that's what I want to go to now. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen right now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back and share my screen again, and I'm going to show you a sample in the Career Readiness Guide. So this is the current guide that we use, and I'll just kind of scroll through. You know, it's a fairly long document. I'm happen to be on page 14 right now of the document. It's about, I want to say, 60 pages long. And in this particular section that I'm in right now, we have multiple examples of resumes. This is a sample of a resume of a student who is getting a Bachelor of Arts in History here at Mason. And I just want to point out a few things that are important sort of rules of thumb, if you will, about any resume, whether you are a freshman or a graduate student. And I want to point out the key pieces of information, that all of them have the same, despite the fact that there will probably be wide variations in the resumes that you all are looking at right now, if you're looking at your own. So at the top, you'll see Sally Jones's name. And Sally Jones, you'll notice she does not put her street address, right? That used to be something that we used to do, but now we just put our city and state, our phone number, and our email address so that employers know how to contact us, because this is the part that's very important. They're either going to call you or they're going to email you. If you have a LinkedIn account and you have the URL for your LinkedIn, you can also put this in the contact information here at the top. Moving on, and what I'll do is I'm going to review this resume, and then I'm going to stop and turn to Mary Claire for questions. In the education section, you'll see here that this student is getting a Bachelor of Arts in History. Very important for you to spell out if you're getting a Bachelor of Arts, if you're doing a Bachelor of Science, and for those of you who are graduate students on the line, you should start the education section with the master's degree that you are scheduled to get. So it's not that you have to have completed it in order for it to be on the education section. You can go ahead and put the expected graduation date. So if you're expecting to get it in, let's say, May of 2021, that's what you would want to put on the right-hand side. If your GPA is over a 3.0, that's really important to have on your resume, because some employers do have GPA cutoffs. And you'll notice in this particular resume, and a lot of our students do work while they're in school, you'll notice that she has put on here that she's on schedule to complete her degree while working 25 hours a week. A lot of our employers like to see that because it shows that you can multitask. It shows that you have a commitment to both work and school. So if that's the category that you are in, I would encourage you to put something like that on your resume. You'll notice that this particular student has also finished her associate's degree at Northern Virginia Community College. We have a lot of students who have transferred in. Really important to include that information. And this particular student has also done a study abroad, which she includes on her resume. Moving on, so the question about if you don't have work experience, what else could you put on your resume? Here's a great example of that. This particular student has put a research project, and she's described it using very strong action verbs. So you notice that she describes using research, analysis, she's conducted interviews, and she's presented her findings. So she's really being able to demonstrate a wide variety of skills for this particular research project. For those of you who may not be doing research, but you may have like a capstone project or another type of teamwork project in a particular class, those would be examples of things that you could put on your resume, especially when you don't have experience, that demonstrate the skills that employers are looking for. And then this student does have some additional experience, which you'll notice. So it looks like she has an internship here at the National Museum of American History. She has her dates on it. And then she also has a retail experience, which even though that may not be related to the particular role that she might be applying for full time, it does demonstrate a wider variety of her skills. And so it would be important for you as a student to think about including that on your resume as well. And then she has her honors and activities down here at the bottom. She doesn't go into a lot of detail here. So for those of you who do belong to student organizations or have volunteered, you do, if you have the space on your resume, you want to write up those descriptions to be able to demonstrate your leadership skills or be able to demonstrate skills that you have developed through volunteer experience. So I'm going to pause here for a minute and ask Mary Claire what questions may have come in about categories on a resume or some of the specifics.
Okay, so so many great questions have been coming through. For students who still currently have their full address on their resume, it's not necessarily they've made a mistake, but they should remove it now. Is that the advice, Ann?
Yeah, so I'll tell you why sometimes it isn't a good idea to put it on there. In some cases, and I'll give you two examples. One is for privacy purposes, you may not want to have it on there, but you do want to let the employer know that you're in Fairfax, Virginia, because let's say that you've applied for a role in the local DMV area. Employers tend to like to see that their applicants are from the area. And conversely, let's say you've applied for a role in California. You may not actually want to put even Fairfax, Virginia on your resume. You may just want to have your phone number and your email address, because again, employers tend to want to interview people who are close by. So for financial reasons, they want to make sure that they're not going to have to move you across country, that kind of thing. So there are some strategies around this. In answer to the question that Mary Claire posed, what I would say is you're not wrong to include your address if you want to keep it on there, but there's no need to keep it on there. So my preference when I'm working with students is to tell them to take it off.
This is a very important question as well. Can you include pronouns in the contact section?
Sure, absolutely. So I would say that, when it comes to, identifying the pronouns that you use, and that's how you identify, I think it's really important for the employer to know that. So I would encourage you to do that if that is an important part of how you identify. So let me pause for a second and explain a little bit more what I mean by that. And that is that a resume, in my mind, as someone who reviews them, there's no right or wrong answer with these documents. These documents are personal, right? I can give you feedback, an employer can give you feedback, but at the end of the day, for me, what's most important is that you feel proud of this document, that it really represents who you are and the skills and knowledge that you've developed along the way that you're trying to articulate to an employer. I'm going to give you feedback based on what I hear from employers, but at the end of the day, it's your decision. And certainly I think you raise a very important issue. And if that is a piece of how you identify and you want the employer to understand that and know that, you should definitely include it.
I love that. Great question. How about minor? Do students need to put that on the resume?
Sure. Yeah. So I know a lot of students will get 1, 2, and I've even seen in some cases 3 minors. Again, at the end of the day, what you want to think about with your document is you want to make sure that it represents you, and that what you're trying to share with the employer is information that's going to help make a difference for that organization. So let's just say that Sally Jones here, that she got a Bachelor of Arts degree in history, but she also minored in business. She could put that on her resume, and maybe that would be helpful for an employer to know, who might want to tap into the business skills that she's developed while she's a student here at Mason. So certainly I think that is something important to include. It just so happens that this particular student didn't have that on her resume.
And maybe we have time for one more. Does that sound good?
Sure, sure.
There's a question that a student thought they had heard that GPA was important to list for undergraduate resumes, but for graduate resumes, the GPA should not be included. True?
Yeah, now that's a great question. So typically, and I know that this is probably going to vary by school and it's going to probably vary by program, but typically students who are in graduate programs generally have a 3.0 or higher anyway. And if they don't, they tend not to stay with those graduate programs or be able to graduate. So I think there is an assumption on the part of a lot of employers that if you are getting a graduate degree, that you do have a 3.0 or higher. And then the other thing I would add is, if you are applying for a government job, and by the way, there is a whole workshop on creating a federal resume. Some employers, and I would also say in academia as well, they do require it. And it may not necessarily be on the resume, but it would be on the application materials that you would file in academia and in government. But in general, for other industries, for other fields, I think you're fine not to include it.
Can we do, we have more questions. I'm just trying to make sure that you get through your content, but I think these 2 can be answered quickly.
Okay.
Did you include a picture?
No. So in some countries, and I know with a number of international students with whom I've worked, they're used to including pictures on their resume. The only time that I have seen where a picture is important is if you are in theater or performing arts, and so a headshot becomes important. And I understand maybe the perceived disconnect by students because of your LinkedIn profile, there's a picture there. But when it comes to using a resume is an official document that you will submit to legally apply for a position with an organization. And you want to make sure that the recruiter or the employer there is not using any other information except your education and experience and skill sets in order to make the determination about whether you should be brought in for an interview.
Last one. Does it have to be 1 page?
Great question, and there's no rule of thumb on this. Now, in general, what you will hear, especially if you're an undergrad, you will hear 1 page, and I would say 9 times out of 10, that is true. Employers only want to look at 1 page. And remember what I said about they only take 10 to 15 seconds to look at your resume. They only have time to look at 1 page. However, there are exceptions, obviously, to every rule. And government is a big exception. So with the government, they have USA Jobs. And again, that's a whole other workshop that we do. And really, they want to see everything. And so oftentimes it is multiple pages. And then I would also say academia is the same way. And if you're a graduate student and you've had experience, usually what I would say is about 2, unless of course you're going into an academic role, which in that case you would use a CV, which is short for curriculum vitae. And that particular document can be multiple pages long.
Thanks, Ann. Let's let you keep going, and then we'll keep coming back to these questions.
Okay, so again, this is a sample resume that is in our career readiness guide. Another page that I want to show you in the guide before I get out of this and go back to the presentation is a page that a lot of our students love when they know that when they realize that we have it. And this is what we call our keywords for resume presentation, or preparation rather. You can see that these particular words are grouped by competency. So administrative, management, communication, research, helping, creative, teaching, financial, and technical. So as you're thinking about the projects that you work on, you're thinking about your volunteer and student organization experience and your internship and other forms of experience you've had. These are great words to take a look at as you are coming up with your descriptions. So think about the work that you're doing, the internship that you've had, and if it's a technical internship, take a look at these particular words to help you describe that particular experience. If you've worked as a member of a team, sometimes the helping and the communication words are really, really useful in describing what you did on that team. If you trained and led a group of people, sometimes the management words are very helpful in describing what it is that you did. And certainly the research words are excellent if you've worked on a research project here at George Mason. So please keep in mind that this page does exist in our career readiness guide, and take a look at that in some of our sample resumes. And we also have additional samples on our website as well. So I'm going to move off of this page, and then what I'm going to do is I am going to go back to our presentation. Okay, give me 1 second. Oh, and did it take it? Let's see here. All right, so this is where we had stopped, and I had mentioned this is our new career readiness guide, the cover of it, which will be out soon, but the one that we currently have on the website is wonderful too, and so take a look at that as you're looking at your resumes. So the key words, and I think somebody had mentioned that, like, do we put too many in? These are the ideas, these are the concepts that you want to think about as you are considering what are key words, what are the things I want to be looking for. So industry specific skills. So again, I'm in technology, or I work with students in technology. And so there are some industry specific skills that those particular employers look for, that if you've acquired or you are studying and about to acquire, would be important to have on your resume. When we say things like soft skills, that's more like, and I don't know that that's the best word to use, but what we're talking about here is communication skills, interpersonal skills, problem solving skills, those kinds of things that employers look for that sort of go beyond the content or knowledge-based areas that you have on your resume. And so certainly these other areas are important too. So any training and certification that you have, oops, I'm sorry about that. The industry jargon. So it's really important as you are thinking about working in a particular industry to do research. So if you're looking at education, for example, what are the current things that are happening in the field of education that would be important for you to have on your resume if you wanted to compete for a role in education, whether it was a teacher or a researcher or some other function in that area. And then company names and locations. So it's really important to also look at, who are the companies that you're interested in? What are they looking for? And what locations as well? So again, remember what I had said about when you have a particular location, where you live on your resume, the employer typically wants to make sure that at least at the entry level that you are co-located or close by. So when we talk about keywords, I want to show you another slide, and that is this slide. So we recognize that a lot of our students want to go into different areas, and so that's why we have the industry-focused model. And what you see here is a list of the various industries where we have pulled together a web page, which you see there at the bottom of the screen. So if you were to go to our website and go to the student section of our website, you can identify the industry-specific resources and select any of these depending on the field you're interested in, and it will provide you some additional information on industry-focused keywords. So I'm going to pause for a second. How are we doing, Mary Claire? Any additional things that I should stay on top of? Any questions?
Well, it's certainly not for a lack of questions. It's just trying to figure out which ones the majority of the group. I want to say to everybody, I'm trying very hard to get answers for all your questions. And Ann, before we end the session today, we should give the folks on the line some options for following up.
Okay, sure.
Some questions are a little more case specific, maybe a little more involved, and could use an appointment.
Yep.
I suppose one that would help the majority of the group is, let's go back to being creative. The reason why it's not recommended that you're creative is because you will confuse the, potentially confuse any computer readers that the employers are using. Is that correct?
That's correct. And I would say perhaps the one exception to that, and again, this is where the industry advisor for this area would be very helpful, and that is if you are a graphic designer. So if you are going into the graphic design field, my colleague Phil Wilkerson, that is his area of expertise, and I would make an appointment with him and he could guide you in that space. But really, that's the only field where I have seen that creativity take off.
And does it matter left justified, right justified, centered? I want to refer students to the guide. Mm-hmm. But is there a quick generalization for that answer?
Yeah. The quick generalization is you want to set your margins. You know, the rule of thumb is 1 inch, but oftentimes for our students, 1 inch would make their resume go onto a second page. So mm-hmm. I would say somewhere between a 1/2 inch and 1 inch. But you don't want to go anywhere outside of a 1/2 inch because then you run into the issue of the computer reader not being able to scan the resume properly.
Thank you, Ann. Let's press on and we'll keep trying.
Okay. Another quick area to think about. So the student who asked about if you don't have work experience to include in your resume, what are some things? This is perfect. This is exactly what you want to think about. What other types of experiences have you had in the classroom or a research project that maybe you were hired by a faculty member to do? These are some ideas of some areas that you could speak to in a resume. You could create a section for one or more of these types of experiences. And on the right-hand side, what you see is the types of skills typically that are involved in these assignments and projects. And those are the types of skills you would want to address as you are describing what you did in those research projects or field experiences, etc. Employers really like to look at these experiences to see what how you are taking what you're learning in the classroom and adapting it to these particular examples. And again, remember page 11 in the career readiness guide, which has all of those skill and competency words in there as you are discerning how to write up those experiences. Moving on, I just want to showcase a sample. And remember, I mentioned to you all those resume samples that are in the career readiness guide. The sample descriptions that are in those resumes in the career readiness guide are ones that you could look at and maybe get some ideas about how to write up your own descriptions. This is a sample of one, for example, of a project. We all, depending on our discipline, are involved in projects in the classroom. This would be for that history or government major that we talked about earlier. So this person is showcasing their research, analysis, communication skills, and then also some of the other skills that they felt that they used in the course of this particular project. So this gives you a good idea about how to write that up. So I'm going to go ahead and move on, but just know that these resume descriptions are in that career readiness guide, and you can take a look at some of the samples in there. Okay, so oftentimes what I will see with a resume is that a student will write a bullet or what I would call a duty statement. Analyzed focus group results. Okay, that's what I would call a duty statement, but what happened as a result of you analyzing the focus group results? Did you increase something? Did you decrease something? That is, maybe it got more efficient. You made something happen faster, you made it better, or you won an award. So you want to think about when you're writing those descriptions, whether it is a work experience or a project, what were the results of the different activities that you were involved in completing that particular project or assignment or experience. So that is really what we call accomplishment statements that ideally you want to strive to have in your resume. Usually when a student is just starting out, so those of you who are freshmen and sophomores here on the workshop, usually that's how it usually starts, is with a duty statement. But you really want to work toward, you want to aspire towards creating a more complete statement that has what the results of your skills and the work that you did on that particular project. So Mary Claire, how are we doing with questions?
We have a bunch, and we have about 5 minutes left, Ann.
Okay.
One student wanted to ask, and I think this would help many, they are worried because they don't have any extracurricular experience. Will that hamper them? But really, that's just one example of the type of experience you could put on your resume, right?
Exactly, exactly. So, you want to think about yourself as the whole person, right? So what are you doing outside of the classroom? So maybe you don't have a student organizational experience, but maybe you volunteered. Or maybe, you've done something to support, let's say if you have family members who are in, the school system and you've done some tutoring. There are lots of different examples out there of other things that you could do. And if for whatever reason you don't have those things on your resume now, another way to think about this is strive to get them this semester. Set a goal for yourself. And one of the things I also wanted to mention is, as Mary Claire had said, is kind of what your next steps are. What's the follow-up, right? So, if you're not sure how to do that or what would be the best thing for you, you could make an appointment with one of our industry advisors. And I'll just go right to this slide. So Handshake is a platform that you all have access to. It has information in there on jobs and internships and workshops, just like JumpStart, which you came to today. But in addition, you can make appointments with your industry advisor. If you're not sure which one you should go to, one of the things that you could do is you could reach out to our office, and our phone number is, and Mary Claire can drop this in the chat for you, but it's 703-993-2370. And you can explain your situation to the person who answers the phone, and they can guide you. Is, a particular industry advisor would be best for you, or let's say you're still exploring, you're still trying to figure out either a major or the different career options you could look at. We have a career counseling team that can help you figure those things out, help you explore, and they can also look at your resume too. So those are folks. You can do the career counseling team or industry advisor. We also do drop-ins every day, and of course they used to be physically drop-ins, and we do have some of those. So our physical drop-ins this semester are on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays from 1 to 3 p.m. in 3400 sub 1. So that's Monday, Wednesday, Thursday. Physically, you can go into 3400 sub 1 between 1 and 3, and someone can look at your resume. We do it virtually 5 days a week, so that way you don't have to drop in. You can just come in through a phone call or through video chat, and we can look at your resume from 1 to 3, Monday through Friday. So those are kind of your next steps that you want to consider as a result of our workshop today.
And Ann, if I could just jump in for a second, we have amazing
Sure.
questions, wonderful questions from people who have taken pauses in their career,
Mm-hmm.
from people who feel they've been sending out multiple resumes and not getting any hits. For all of you, what I'm trying to type as fast as I can is the advice that Ann just gave you, is to make an appointment. So if we didn't get to your question today, it's because I think you would benefit from the customized advice that making an appointment would give you. So please do follow through on that. I put all the links to do so in the chat window. Thank you.
Yes, and for those of you who are alumni, you are also eligible for services. So please feel free to reach out. If you can't get into Handshake, you could still call that phone number, which is 703-993-2370. And the person who answers the phone can assist you and put you with the correct person. You know, all of you, and certainly when I saw the poll, you were sort of in a lot of different categories. We had a few freshmen, sophomores, we had more juniors, seniors, and graduate students. So you all have different situations. So I'm sure that you have a lot of follow-up questions. The expectation wasn't that this workshop would necessarily be able to answer everything. We kind of wanted to do a broad brush and just give you next steps, because really for each of you, it's really important for you to meet with an advisor or one of our peer career advisors to ask your questions, to ask those specific things about your experience, about your background, so that we can give you some specific advice and guidance about that. And so again, as Mary Claire said, I would encourage you to go into Handshake and make an appointment, or reach out by phone, and we can set you up with the correct person who can assist you.
Boy, I think I speak for all of us when I say we could have spent the whole day here, Ann, because resumes are really important. So I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody's question, but to Ann's point, now armed with the career readiness guide and with this slide on the screen, take a screenshot of it if you like. You know what your next steps are. Make an appointment, bring a copy of what you have, use the career readiness guide to get started if you haven't already, and we will be here for you for your in-depth resume questions as the semester goes on. So Ann, thank you so much for those rapid fire answers and for guiding us through this presentation. We really appreciate it.
Sure, yeah, no problem. And everybody have a great day and enjoy the workshop. Please come back and participate in that. So thanks so much.
Bye everybody, take care.